Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the vast chamber of the Galactic Council, her hands clasped behind her back as she waited. The hall stretched up so high that clouds formed near the ceiling. 12 massive seats surrounded her in a circle, each one designed for a different alien species. The Zeltharians floated in tanks of purple liquid. The Vorthak looked like living crystals that sang when they spoke. The insect-like Kretok clicked and buzzed in their hive clusters. All of them were staring down at her. High Counselor Vexthul spoke first. His voice came through the translation device as smooth and cold as ice. "So the humans wish to join our council," Sarah nodded. "We do, Your Honor. Earth has achieved faster than light travel. We've explored 50 star systems. We believe we're ready to take our place among the galactic community." A sound like laughter rippled through the chamber, though it came from creatures that had no mouths. The Zeltharian counselor's tentacles twitched in what Sarah had learned was amusement. 50 years of space travel, Vexthul said. How precious. Counselor Jektar, one of the crystal beings, sang a note that translated as, "Our youngest member has been among the stars for 10,000 years. You speak of 50. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her voice steady. "We may be new to space, but we're not new to learning. We've studied your languages, your customs, your histories." "Histories," repeated Kretok, the insect counselor. The translator made the clicking sounds into words. "Your entire recorded civilization spans 10,000 years. Our hive remembers 100 times that span." Another counselor leaned forward. This one looked like a tree made of metal and spoke in booming tones. "Tell us, little human, what do you offer the galaxy? What great works have you built? What wars have you won? What empires have you ruled?" Sarah opened her mouth to speak, but Vexthul raised a tentacle to stop her. "Peace, Thorvak. The child speaks of learning. Perhaps that is enough." The way he said enough made it clear it wasn't much. "We propose," Vexthul continued, "to grant humanity probationary status. You will be given 3 sectors to maintain on the rim of the galaxy. Peaceful systems. Safe systems. Nothing important happens there. You may practice being galactic citizens where you cannot cause harm." Sarah's jaw tightened. "Practice? Think of it as training wheels," said another counselor with what might have been kindness. "Every species must learn. We learned over millions of years. Perhaps you can learn faster." The vote was quick. 12 hands, tentacles, crystals, and claws raised in favor. None opposed. Sarah realized they weren't even taking this seriously enough to argue about it. "You will be given ships and technology suitable for your current level," Vexthul announced. "Older models, but functional. You will report to the council every 5 years on your progress. In 100 years, we will review your status." 100 years. Sarah bit back her first response and simply nodded. Dr. Elena Vasquez waited for Sarah outside the chamber. Elena was shorter than the Admiral, with gray hair and sharp eyes behind thin glasses. She had been quiet during most of their time on the council station, but Sarah knew that meant she was thinking. "So?" Elena asked as they walked toward their shuttle. 3 sectors on the rim. Old technology. Report back in a century if we haven't embarrassed ourselves." Sarah's voice was bitter. Elena nodded slowly. "Did you notice how they voted?" 12-0. Hard to miss. "No," Elena said. "I mean, they didn't discuss it." "Didn't debate?" "This was decided before we walked in there." Sarah stopped walking. "You think they planned this?" "I think they've dealt with young species before. This is probably standard procedure. Give the children some toys and a sandbox to play in. Check back when they're grown up." They reached their shuttle, a small craft that looked primitive next to the sleek alien vessels around it. As they settled into their seats, Sarah stared out at the massive space station that housed the council. It was beautiful and ancient, covered in symbols from a dozen worlds. "Elena," she said quietly, "how old do you think this station is?" Elena followed her gaze. "Computer analysis suggests at least 50,000 years. Maybe more. 50,000 years." Sarah let that sink in. "They've been running the galaxy since before humans invented agriculture." "Yes. And they think we're babies." "Yes." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, and Elena noticed it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Good," Sarah said. "Good? They're not taking us seriously. That means they're not watching us carefully." Sarah began entering coordinates for their jump home. "Tell me, Doctor, in all your studies of council history, Did you find any records of the Devourer Wars? Elena frowned. I found some references. Ancient machine intelligence that consumed organic matter. Defeated thousands of years ago, why? Because I found more than references. Sarah's fingers moved over the controls. I found detailed reports, battle plans, casualty lists, and something interesting in the technical specifications. What? The Devourers aren't extinct. They're dormant, and according to the energy readings I've been tracking, they're starting to wake up. Elena stared at her. You think there's going to be another war? I think there's going to be a war whether anyone expects it or not. And I think the Council has been at peace so long they've forgotten how to fight. The shuttle jumped to hyperspace, leaving the Council station behind. Sarah leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. 3 sectors on the rim, she murmured. Perfect position to watch the dark edge of the galaxy. Perfect position to see trouble coming first. Sarah, Elena said carefully, what exactly are you planning? Sarah opened her eyes. The Council thinks we need a century to learn how to be galactic citizens. I think we need to learn how to be galactic defenders. And I think we have a lot less time than they imagine. Over the next month, strange things began happening in humanity's 3 assigned sectors. Ships that should have been scrapped were instead taken apart and studied. Human engineers pored over every piece of Council technology they were given, learning how it worked and how to make it better. Human diplomats began visiting other species in nearby systems. Not the great Council races, but the smaller civilizations, the ones who were also considered too young or too primitive for full membership. They made friends. They shared stories. They learned about old legends and ancient fears, and they asked questions. Lots of questions. Meanwhile, Sarah Chen stood in the command center of humanity's new base on the rim world of Haven. Banks of screens showed sensor readings from across their assigned territory. Most showed the peaceful, empty space the Council expected them to monitor. But 3 screens showed something else. Energy patterns at the edge of known space. Faint signals that matched the old Devourer technical specifications Elena had helped her find in the Council archives. Admiral, called Lieutenant Torres from the communication station, we're getting reports from our listening posts. The energy readings are getting stronger. Sarah nodded. She had been expecting this. How long until the Council notices? She asked. At current levels? Maybe 6 months before their sensors pick it up. Maybe a year. And how long until whatever's out there becomes a real threat? Elena looked up from her research station. Based on the historical patterns, if the Devourers are truly awakening, we have perhaps 2 years before they begin active expansion. Sarah studied the screens showing the peaceful sectors humanity was supposed to be learning to manage. 3 sectors full of refugees from old wars, traders from small civilizations, and scientists studying ancient ruins. People the Council considered unimportant. People who would be the first to die if she was right about what was coming. Begin Phase 2, she ordered. Around the command center, her staff began implementing plans they had been working on since the day they left the Council station. Messages went out to human colonies. Technical specifications were transmitted to Earth's shipyards. And most importantly, carefully worded invitations went out to leaders of the smaller civilizations in their area. The Council had given humanity 3 sectors to practice in. They had no idea that humanity was about to turn those 3 sectors into the galaxy's first line of defense. In the ancient halls of the Council station, Vexthal floated in his tank and reviewed reports from across the galaxy. Everything was peaceful. Everything was stable. The humans were behaving themselves in their assigned territory, causing no trouble. Exactly as expected from such a young species. He dismissed the reports and turned his attention to more important matters. There were trade disputes to mediate between the older races, territorial agreements to review, and cultural exchanges to oversee. It never occurred to him to wonder what the humans were actually doing in those 3 quiet sectors on the rim. After all, nothing important ever happened out there. The first attack came without warning. High Counselor Vexthal was reviewing trade agreements when his aide burst into the chamber. The young Zeltharian's tentacles were pale with fear. Your Honor, the aide gasped. Corvash Prime has gone silent. Vexthal set down his datapad. Corvash Prime was a major world in the inner systems, home to 15 billion beings. Worlds like that didn't just go silent. Communication problems? He asked. No, sir. The entire system appears to be empty. Within hours, the truth became clear. Corvash Prime was gone. Not destroyed, consumed. The planet itself had been stripped down to its core and converted into something else. Something that moved with purpose through space. The few escape pods that made it out brought terrifying reports. Machines that ate everything in their path. Ships that learned from every attack. An intelligence that grew stronger with every world it devoured. Impossible, whispered Counselor Jektar, her crystal form flickering with distress. The Devourers were destroyed millennia ago. Apparently not, said Thorvak grimly. His metal bark was dark with worry. The survivors' descriptions matched the old records exactly. The second attack came 3 days later. Then the third. Each time the machine fleets moved faster, struck harder, and adapted to whatever defenses they faced. The Council's response fleets arrived to find nothing but empty space and conversion debris. Panic began to spread through the inner systems. Refugees fled toward the galactic center, carrying stories of unstoppable machines that turned entire worlds into more of themselves. The Council's military commanders found themselves fighting an enemy they didn't understand against tactics they had never seen. We need time, General Korvex reported to the emergency session. The grizzled warrior's 6 arms gestured helplessly at the tactical displays. Time to study them, time to adapt our strategies. Time to evacuate the civilian populations. How much time? Vexthul demanded. Months, maybe a year. Where can we make a stand? What world can we fortify strongly enough to hold them? Korvex studied the star charts. Sanctuary Prime. It's already a refugee center, well defended, multiple escape routes. If we're going to stop them anywhere, it would be there. Vexthul looked at the display showing Sanctuary Prime's location. It sat at the junction of 3 major trade routes, protected by some of the Council's best defenses. It was also dangerously close to the Rim territories, the Rim territories where the humans had been placed. What about the younger species in that area? He asked. The humans and their neighbors? Expendable, Korvex said bluntly. If they can buy us time by slowing the enemy advance, their sacrifice might save billions. Vexthul floated in his tank thinking. The humans had been with the Council for barely 2 years. They were still learning, still proving themselves. It seemed cruel to ask them to face an enemy that was destroying entire Council fleets, but billions of lives hung in the balance. Contact. Admiral Chen, he ordered Sarah. Received the message while she was inspecting. The new defensive installations around Haven. The past 18 months had transformed humanity's 3 sectors from quiet backwaters into a bustling network of bases, listening posts and supply depots. Ships from dozens of smaller civilizations had joined the growing alliance Sarah was building, but she had been expecting this call. Admiral Chen, Vexthul's image said from the communication screen. I'm sure you've heard about the attacks in the inner systems. We have, Your Honor, our condolences to the victims' families. The situation is grave. The Council is preparing a defense at Sanctuary Prime, but we need time to organize our forces. I'm ordering you to take your fleets and delay the enemy advance as long as possible. Sarah kept her face carefully neutral. You want us to fight the Devourers. You know what they are? Dr. Vasquez has been researching the old records. We know what we're facing. Then you understand the odds. Your sacrifice will be remembered, Admiral. The Council will honor your courage. Sarah almost smiled at that. They were asking her to die for them and calling it an honor. But she had been preparing for this moment since the day she left the Council station. I accept the mission, Your Honor. But I have conditions. Vexthul's tentacles twitched in surprise. Conditions? Complete tactical command of the defense, access to all Council intelligence on the Devourers, and the right to requisition any resources I need from Council territory. That's highly irregular. So is asking a probationary species to hold back an invasion. Do you want our help or not? Vexthul was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. Agreed. But Admiral, you understand that Sanctuary Prime houses over 40 billion refugees. If it falls, it won't fall on my watch, Sarah said. After the connection ended, Elena approached Sarah's command chair. He thinks we're going to die heroically while he evacuates the important people. I know. Are we going to die heroically? Sarah turned to look at the displays showing their defensive preparations. Human ships worked alongside vessels from 37 different species. Modified weapons, enhanced sensors, and communication networks that linked every ship in the fleet. Elena, she said quietly, in all your research on the Devourers, what did you find about their weaknesses? They adapt to any attack pattern within hours. They learn from every encounter. They process information through a networked intelligence that becomes stronger with each victory. Elena paused. Why? Because they've never fought humans before. They've never fought anyone who thinks like we do. Sarah stood and walked to the tactical display. It showed the predicted route of the Devourer fleet toward Sanctuary Prime. 3 possible paths, all leading through the sectors humanity now controlled. The Council thinks in terms of grand fleets and heroic last stands, she continued. They meet force with force, honor with honor. The Devourers have adapted to that kind of thinking over thousands of years. But humans think differently. Humans think dirty. Sarah's smile was sharp. We don't fight fair. We don't fight with honor. We fight to win. Over the next week, strange reports began reaching the Council. The human fleet wasn't massing for a defensive battle. Instead, small groups of ships were scattered throughout the region, setting up what looked like supply depots and communication relays. More puzzling, human representatives were meeting with every species in the area, not just the civilized ones. They were talking to pirates, smugglers, rebels, and exiles. The dregs of galactic society that the Council preferred to ignore. What are they planning? Vexthul wondered aloud as he studied the reports. Kretak, the insect counselor, buzzed thoughtfully. They appear to be organizing the local populations. But for what purpose? Perhaps they intend to evacuate them? Suggested Jektar. To where? They have no ships capable of moving such numbers. The answer came when the Devourer fleet finally entered human territory. Instead of the massed defense the machines expected, they found nothing, empty space, abandoned stations, and silence. Then the attacks began. Not the grand fleet engagement the Devourers were prepared for, but something entirely different. A single human ship would appear out of nowhere, strike at a Devourer vessel and vanish before the enemy could respond. Then another attack from a different direction. Then another. The Devourers tried to adapt, but there was nothing consistent to adapt to. Each attack was different. Each strike came from an unexpected angle. The machines found themselves fighting dozens of small engagements instead of one large battle. Worse, their attempts to pursue the attackers led them into carefully prepared traps. What looked like a fleeing human ship would lead a Devourer squadron into an asteroid field rigged with explosives, or through a nebula where pirates waited in ambush, or past a seemingly dead world that erupted with hidden weapon platforms. Status report, Admiral, Chen requested as she stood in the command center on Haven. Devourer advance has slowed by 60%, reported Lieutenant Torres. They're adapting to our hit-and-run tactics, but slowly. The irregular pattern of attacks is causing processing delays in their network. Casualties? Light on our side. We've lost 12 ships, but rescued most of the crews. Enemy losses are harder to calculate. They're recycling damaged units, but their overall fleet strength has decreased by approximately 8%. Sarah nodded. 8% didn't sound like much, but it was 8% more than anyone else had managed. What about our allies? Dr. Vasquez looked up from her station. The refugee populations are responding better than expected. The Corvani pirates have been especially effective at hit-and-run attacks, and the Yelthari traders are providing intelligence on Devourer movements. They're fighting. They're learning to fight. Human style. Sarah walked to the main display, which showed the slow advance of the Devourer fleet toward Sanctuary Prime. Red dots marked enemy positions, while blue indicators showed the scattered human forces harassing their flanks. But there were other colors now, too. Green dots marked allied ships from the smaller species. Yellow showed civilian vessels that had been armed and organized into militia groups. Even orange indicators representing the various pirate and rebel groups that were joining the fight. For the first time in galactic history, the rejected and ignored were fighting alongside the established powers. And they were learning that strength didn't always come from size or advanced technology. Sometimes it came from refusing to fight the way your enemy expected. Time until they reach Sanctuary Prime? Sarah asked. At current rate, 6 weeks, the breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Elena Vasquez was studying captured Devourer technology when she noticed something strange. The machines weren't just learning from each battle. They were sharing that knowledge instantly across their entire network. Every ship, every drone, every processing unit was connected to a vast artificial intelligence that grew smarter with each encounter. But networks had weaknesses. Admiral, Elena called from her research station. I need to show you something. Sarah hurried over to where Elena was displaying technical readings from their latest skirmishes with the Devourer fleet. "Watch this," Elena said, highlighting a section of data. "This shows how they adapted to our stealth attacks. The learning curve is almost instant, within minutes. They're countering tactics that took us weeks to develop. That's what makes them so dangerous," Sarah agreed. "Yes, but look at this." Elena pulled up another display. "Yesterday, our forces hit 3 different Devourer squadrons simultaneously. We use completely different tactics for each attack: kinetic bombardment, energy weapons, and cyber warfare." Sarah studied the readings. "The response times were inconsistent." "Exactly. When they face multiple different threats at the same time, there's a delay. The network gets confused trying to process contradictory information. For about 17 minutes, their reaction time dropped by 40%. 17 minutes, Sarah repeated thoughtfully. "That's not much time. It's enough. If we can coordinate attacks across multiple fronts using completely different strategies, we can create windows of vulnerability." Sarah was already thinking ahead. "How many different types of attacks would we need, based on these readings?" "At least 6 simultaneous engagements using completely unrelated tactics. The more different, the better. 6 different fleets, 6 different strategies, perfect timing." Sarah smiled. "I know just the people to ask." The message went out across the scattered Allied forces that had gathered in humanity's territory. Representatives from 37 species received the same unusual request: "Bring your best warriors to Haven for a strategy meeting. But don't bring your admirals or generals. Bring your pirates, your rebels, your outcasts. Bring the people who fight dirty." The meeting took place in Haven's largest conference room. Sarah looked around the table at the most diverse gathering in galactic history. There was Captain Vexkala, a Corvani pirate whose 6 arms were covered in scars. Next to her sat Drem the Exile, a former council military officer who had been disgraced for using dishonorable tactics. At the far end sat Singing Death and Void, a Yelthari whose people were considered too primitive for council membership. "Ladies, gentlemen, and various other classifications," Sarah began. "We have a problem. The Devourers are learning to counter our attacks. We need to hit them with something they can't adapt to." "Nothing they cannot adapt to," rumbled Drem. His rocky features were grim. "Is their nature wrong?" Sarah said. "They can't adapt to chaos. They can't process completely random information. So we're going to give them so many different problems to solve that their network crashes." She activated the tactical display, showing the current position of the Devourer fleet as it crawled toward Sanctuary Prime. 6 coordinated attacks. 6 completely different methods. 6 problems they've never seen before. Sarah pointed to different sections of the enemy formation. "Captain Vexkala, your people specialize in boarding actions. Can you get inside their ships?" The pirate's 6 eyes gleamed. "Corvani, do not knock on doors. We make our own." "Drem, your exile fleet still has council military training. Standard tactical engagement? Honor demands direct battle." The disgraced officer nodded. "Singing Death, your people use biological weapons, correct?" The Yelthari clicked agreement. "Life fights metal. Always has." Sarah continued around the table, assigning different tasks to each group. "Energy weapons, cyber attacks, kinetic bombardment, psychological warfare." Each species would do what they did best, but all at exactly the same time. "The key is coordination," Sarah emphasized. "We hit them everywhere at once with everything we have. Different tactics, different technologies, different approaches. Make their network try to solve 6 impossible puzzles simultaneously." "And if this fails?" asked Drem. Sarah looked at the tactical display showing Sanctuary Prime with its 40 billion refugees waiting helplessly for rescue. "Then we try something else." Humans don't give up. The attack began at exactly 800 Galactic Standard Time. 6 human-led task forces struck the Devourer fleet from every direction. Captain Vexkala's raiders used their natural strength and multiple arms to board enemy ships, fighting through corridors with weapons that had no electronic components the machines could analyze. Drem's exile fleet engaged in classical space combat, ship-to-ship battles with formation flying and coordinated salvos. Meanwhile, the Yelthari released clouds of engineered bacteria that ate through Devourer hull plating. Human cyber warfare specialists launched computer viruses designed to make the enemy's own adaptation protocols turn against them. And scattered throughout the battle, irregular forces used everything from ancient chemical weapons to improvised ram attacks. In the Devourer network, Alarm screamed as the artificial intelligence tried to process what was happening. 6 different threats requiring 6 different responses. Chemical weapons that needed biological countermeasures. Computer viruses that demanded digital solutions. Boarding parties that could only be stopped by physical force. The network began to lag. "It's working," Elena reported from her monitoring station. "Response time is down 60% and dropping. They're trying to adapt to everything at once and failing." "How long will it last?" Sarah asked, unknown. "But they're learning. Give them another hour and they'll start prioritizing threats." "Then we don't give them an hour." Sarah opened a communication channel to all allied forces. "All units Phase 4, maximum aggression, hit everything that moves." What followed was the strangest battle in galactic history. Devourer ships found themselves under attack by enemy forces that made no sense. Pirates who fought like berserkers alongside disciplined military units. Primitive species using weapons the machines had no programming to counter. Human ships that seemed to appear from nowhere, strike once, and vanish. But the real surprise came when the refugee populations of Sanctuary Prime joined the fight. "Admiral," Torres called from the communications station. "We're getting messages from the planet's surface."
"The civilians want to help," Sarah frowned. "Help how?"
"They're civilians. They're saying they can provide intelligence, track enemy movements, coordinate supply runs. They want to be part of the network." Elena looked up from her station. "That's brilliant. If we can get real-time intelligence from the surface, we can coordinate our attacks even better." "But they're not military. They're refugees, traders, families. They're people who want to live," Elena said quietly. "And you've shown them that they don't have to die helplessly." Sarah thought of the billions of beings on Sanctuary Prime. Families who had fled the Devourer advance, merchants whose worlds had been consumed, children who had watched their homes disappear into the machine's maws. "Open a channel to the planet," she ordered. The response was overwhelming. Within hours, every settlement on Sanctuary Prime had organized volunteer networks. Former engineers studied Devourer technology and suggested new attack vectors. Retired military officers organized civilian defense forces. Even children contributed, using their knowledge of games and puzzles to help human tacticians find new ways to confuse the enemy network. For the first time in the Devourer's long existence, they found themselves fighting not just military forces but an entire population. Every civilian was a sensor. Every refugee was an intelligence asset. Every family was a strategic planning unit. The machine's network, designed to process military threats and tactical challenges, began to struggle with the sheer volume of unexpected data. How do you adapt to a grandmother who spots your stealth ships from her garden? How do you counter a child who invents a new coding language that breaks your communication protocols? "Status report," Sarah called as the battle raged around Sanctuary Prime. "Devourer advance has stopped," Torres reported. "They're holding position trying to process all the incoming data." "Casualties?" "Lighter than expected. The civilians are feeding us targeting data that's letting our forces avoid the heaviest defenses." "And their network?" Elena smiled for the first time in weeks. "Overloaded. They're trying to adapt to 17 different types of attacks, coordinate responses to 43 separate threat categories, and process intelligence data from over 2 billion individual sources. Their response time is now 3 hours and climbing." Sarah felt a moment of satisfaction, but she knew it wouldn't last. The Devourers would eventually find a way to filter the information overload. They would adapt as they always did, but something had changed in this battle. For the first time, the galaxy's forgotten peoples, the pirates, the exiles, the refugees, the primitive species, had fought alongside the established powers as equals. More than equals. They had fought as family. "Admiral," called a new voice from the communication station. The siege of Sanctuary Prime stretched into its 4th week, and Admiral Sarah Chen stood before a sight that should have been impossible. The main tactical display showed Devourer ships retreating, not falling back to regroup. Not repositioning for a better attack. Actually retreating. "Confirm that reading," she ordered. Lieutenant Torres checked his instruments twice before responding. "Confirmed, Admiral. The outer ring of Devourer vessels is pulling back toward the system edge. They're running away." Around the command center, officers from 37 different species stared at the display in disbelief. In 10,000 years of galactic history, no one had ever seen an enemy retreat from the Devourers. "Why?" asked Captain Vexcala. The Corvani pirate had been coordinating boarding actions for weeks, and her 6 arms were bandaged from countless battles. Machines do not fear. They do not tire. What makes them flee? Dr. Elena Vasquez looked up from her research station, her eyes bright with discovery. They're not fleeing. They're trying to simplify the problem. Sarah turned to her. Explain. For 3 weeks they've been trying to adapt to our tactics, but every time they solve one problem, we create 2 more. Every time they counter one type of attack, we invent a new one. Elena pulled up a complex data chart. Look at this progression. Day 1, they faced 6 different attack types. Day 5, 12 types. Day 15, 43 different tactical approaches. We've been teaching them, Sarah realized, not teaching. Overwhelming. Their network is designed to learn and adapt, but it has limits. We've been feeding it more variables than it can process. So now it's trying to reduce the complexity by eliminating some of the sources, by retreating, by choosing which battles to fight. But here's the interesting part. They can't just eliminate us. Every time they pull back from one type of threat, we replace it with 2 new ones. Sarah studied the tactical display more carefully. The Devourer retreat wasn't random. They were pulling back from the areas where civilian populations were providing intelligence, but staying engaged where military forces operated traditionally. They're trying to fight a conventional war, she said slowly. They want us to meet them fleet to fleet, honor to honor, the way the Council races always have. But we won't give them that fight. No, we won't. Sarah opened a communication channel to all Allied forces. All commanders, this is Admiral Chen. The enemy is trying to force us into a traditional engagement. We will not cooperate. Continue irregular operations. Increase civilian involvement. Show them that this galaxy doesn't fight by their rules. Over the next days, the war around Sanctuary Prime became something unprecedented. Instead of grand space battles, it became a massive game of hide-and-seek played across an entire star system. Human ships would appear from asteroid fields, strike at Devourer vessels, and vanish before retaliation could arrive. Pirate crews would board enemy ships, plant explosives, and escape in stolen shuttles. Civilian volunteers would guide Allied forces through known space lanes, while refugees provided real-time intelligence on enemy movements. Most importantly, the different species began teaching each other their unique approaches to warfare. Corvani pirates learned human stealth techniques. Human engineers studied Yelthari biological weapons. Drem's exile fleet shared traditional council military doctrine with species that had never been allowed to learn it. The result was a fighting force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Status report from all fronts, Sarah requested. Torres consulted his displays. The Yelthari biological attack on the enemy supply convoy was successful. 90% of their logistics ships are infected with metal-eating bacteria. The Corvani boarding teams have captured 3 Devourer command vessels, and the civilian intelligence network is reporting enemy troop movements with 96% accuracy. What about our losses? Surprisingly light. The enemy's confusion is working in our favor. They're spending more time trying to understand our tactics than implementing their own. Elena looked up from her station. Admiral, I'm seeing something interesting in the Devourer communication patterns. They're sending more messages to each other than usual. Much more. What kind of messages? Requests for clarification? Tactical queries. Adaptation protocols that contradict each other. Elena's voice grew excited. I think their network is arguing with itself. Sarah felt a spark of hope. Show me. The display filled with translated Devourer communications. What Elena had found was remarkable. The artificial intelligence that controlled the machine fleet was experiencing something like confusion. Different parts of the network were proposing different solutions to the same problems. Units were receiving contradictory orders. Some ships were trying to adapt to human tactics while others were implementing anti-pirate measures. They're experiencing analysis paralysis, Elena explained. Too many variables, too many possible solutions. The network can't decide which approach to take, so it's trying all of them at once. How long will this last? Unknown. But historically, the Devourers have always resolved internal conflicts by eliminating the weaker analysis protocols. The problem is, in this case, every protocol has valid points. They're all partially right and partially wrong. Sarah studied the chaos unfolding in the enemy fleet. Devourer ships were moving in confused patterns, some advancing while others retreated. Some were adapting to one type of threat while remaining vulnerable to others. What if we helped them make a decision? she asked. Elena frowned. Help them? Why would we want them to resolve their confusion? Because, Sarah said with a predator's smile, we get to choose which decision they make. The plan was audacious even by human standards. Instead of continuing their chaotic multi-front assault, the Allied forces would present the Devourer network with a single, clear problem to solve. They would offer the machines exactly what they wanted, a traditional space battle with defined rules and predictable tactics. But it would be a trap. You want to what? Captain Vexicala's 6 eyes were wide with disbelief. Fight them directly? All together? In open space? That's exactly what I want to do, Sarah confirmed. We gather every ship we have, form a traditional battle line, and engage their main fleet in conventional combat. That is suicide, Shrem protested. They outnumber us 5-1. Their individual ships are more powerful. In direct combat, we cannot win. We're not trying to win the battle, Sarah explained. We're trying to win the war. Look at this. She activated the tactical display showing the current positions of both fleets. For weeks, we've been hitting them with random attacks from unexpected directions. Their network has been trying to adapt to chaos. But what if we suddenly become predictable? Elena caught on first. The network would latch onto the familiar pattern. Traditional space combat is something they understand, something they've faced before. Exactly. All their analysis protocols would suddenly agree on the solution. Form battle lines, advance in formation, defeat the enemy through superior firepower. Every part of their network would implement the same strategy. But we would still lose, Vexcala pointed out. Sarah's smile grew wider. Who says we're going to follow traditional tactics once the battle starts? The message went out to every Allied ship in the system. Form up for a conventional fleet engagement, battle lines by species, with humans in the center as flagship command. Approach the enemy at standard velocity with weapons powered but not firing. Exactly the kind of battle the Council races had been fighting for millennia. The Devourer response was immediate. Their confused, contradictory movements stopped. Ships that had been operating independently suddenly moved with perfect coordination. The entire enemy fleet formed up in a classic battle formation and began advancing to meet the Allied forces. For the first time since the siege began, both sides were behaving exactly as galactic military doctrine prescribed. Enemy fleet is advancing in standard attack formation, Torres reported. They're targeting our lead ships with conventional weapons. Perfect, Sarah said. All ships begin standard evasive maneuvers. Make it look like we're following traditional combat protocols. Around Sanctuary Prime, 40 billion civilians watched as the two fleets approached each other in the stately dance of formal space warfare. It looked like every military engagement in galactic history. Massive ships moving in careful formations, weapons charging, shields powering up. But Sarah wasn't watching the ships. She was watching the data streams showing Devourer network communications. Elena, are they taking the bait? Completely. The network has resolved its conflicts. All analysis protocols are now focused on conventional tactical solutions. They're not even monitoring for irregular threats anymore. Then, it's time to remind them why humans don't fight fair. Sarah opened a channel to the civilian volunteers on Sanctuary Prime. All ground teams. This is Admiral Chen. Begin Phase 5. Across the planet's surface, millions of refugees, traders, and families began implementing a plan they had been preparing in secret for weeks. Using equipment salvaged from their destroyed worlds, knowledge shared between dozens of species, and human ingenuity, they had turned Sanctuary Prime itself into a weapon. Not a conventional weapon that fired missiles or energy beams. Something much more devastating to an artificial intelligence. They had turned the planet into a massive signal jammer. Energy surge from the planet's surface, Torres reported in amazement. It's blocking all Devourer communications. 6 months after the Battle of Sanctuary Prime, Admiral Sarah Chen stood once again in the great chamber of the Galactic Council. But this time she was not alone. Behind her stood representatives from 43 species that had fought in the war. Captain Vexcala flexed her 6 scarred arms. Shrem the Exile wore the medals he had thought lost forever. Singing Death in Void carried the ceremonial weapons of her people. Former pirates stood beside former refugees united by the bonds forged in battle. The council chamber itself had changed. Additional seats had been installed to accommodate the new representatives. The ancient hall that had once echoed with the voices of only 12 species now buzzed with dozens of different languages, all being translated in real time. High Counselor Vex Thule floated in his tank, his tentacles moving in what Sarah had learned to recognize as deep thought. The other original council members watched from their seats, their ancient faces showing expressions Sarah had never seen before. Uncertainty. Admiral Chen, Vex Thule began, his voice carrying across the vast chamber. The council has reviewed the reports from the Devourer War. Your unconventional methods proved effective. They proved necessary, Sarah replied calmly. Counselor Jektar sang a crystalline note that translated as confusion. We do not understand how you achieved such coordination between species that have never worked together. Some of your allies were enemies of each other before the war, Sarah smiled. They learned that survival matters more than old grudges. When the choices between working together or dying separately, most people choose life. Kretak's insect cliques were rapid and agitated, but the tactical approaches you used, they violate every principle of honorable warfare. Irregular attacks, civilian involvement, deception, guerrilla tactics. You mean they violate every principle of warfare that made you vulnerable to the Devourers? Sarah interrupted. Your honor almost got 40 billion people killed. The chamber fell silent. In the history of the Galactic Council, no one had ever spoken so bluntly to the ancient leaders. You think us fools, said Thorvak, his metal bark darkening with anger. You think your brief existence gives you wisdom we lack. I think, Sarah said carefully, that you've been at peace so long you forgot how to fight. And I think you've been in power so long you forgot how to listen. She gestured to the representatives behind her. These people didn't follow me because I ordered them to. They followed me because I asked them to, because I treated them as equals instead of subjects, because I learned from them instead of lecturing them. Elena stepped forward from the group of human representatives. If I may, your honors, I've prepared a detailed analysis of what made our alliance successful. Vexthel's tentacles twitched. Present your findings, Dr. Vasquez. Elena activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber. The key factor was diversity of approach. Each species brought unique perspectives and capabilities. The Corvani understood boarding actions. The Yelthari knew biological warfare. The humans contributed strategic coordination and technological adaptation. The display showed battle footage from the war, highlighting how different species had worked together. But most importantly, Elena continued, we shared knowledge freely. No species hoarded their secrets or claimed superiority. When the Yelthari taught us about biological weapons, they didn't demand payment or political concessions. When humans shared stealth technology, we didn't ask for exclusive trade agreements. Counselor Jektar's crystal form flickered. You shared military secrets with primitive species? We shared military secrets with allies, Sarah corrected, and discovered that some of those primitive species had developed solutions to problems we never knew existed. She activated another part of the display, showing technical specifications for weapons and tactics developed during the war. The signal jamming technique that broke the Devourer network, that was invented by refugee children playing communications games. The biological agents that dissolved their hull plating, ancient Yelthari knowledge that your databases classified as primitive superstition. The boarding tactics that proved so effective, pirate techniques that the Council had spent centuries trying to suppress. Vexithul was quiet for a long moment, studying the display. And you believe this cooperation can continue now that the threat is over? It already has, said Captain Vexkala, stepping forward. Her translator made her multi-toned voice understandable to all species. Corvani pirates now patrol trade routes that Council ships abandoned. We protect merchants who once fled from us. Shrem nodded his massive, rocky head. Exile fleets have returned to serve alongside Council forces. Old dishonor is forgotten in light of new service. The refugee populations have organized into mutual aid societies, added another representative. Species that were strangers 6 months ago now share resources and knowledge freely. Sarah watched the Council members process this information. She could see the struggle in their ancient minds, the tension between millennia of tradition, and the undeniable proof that change had brought victory. The galaxy has grown beyond your original structure, she said gently, not grown apart from it but grown beyond it. The question is whether the Council will grow with it or be left behind. Thorvak's metal bark creaked as he leaned forward. What exactly are you proposing, human? I'm proposing that the Galactic Council become what it was always meant to be. A forum for all the galaxy's peoples, not just the oldest ones. I'm proposing that you stop thinking about governing subjects and start thinking about serving citizens. And what role would humanity play in this new structure? Asked Vexthul. Sarah had been waiting for this question. Whatever role the galaxy needs us to play. If you need defenders, we'll defend. If you need diplomats, we'll negotiate. If you need teachers, we'll share what we've learned. Teachers, Kretak clicked thoughtfully. You would teach council species your methods? We would teach anyone who wants to learn, just as we learned from everyone who was willing to share. Elena stepped forward again. Your Honors, we've prepared a proposal for a new council structure. One that includes representation for all galactic species, regardless of age or technological level. One that prioritizes cooperation over hierarchy. The holographic display changed to show a new organizational chart. Instead of the traditional council of 12 ruling species, it showed a complex network of representatives, advisors, and specialist groups. The Explorers Guild would coordinate expansion into new territories. The Defenders Alliance would maintain galactic security. The Trade Federation would handle economic matters. The Cultural Exchange would preserve the knowledge and traditions of all species. And humans would lead all of these? Asked Jektar suspiciously. Humans would participate in all of them, Sarah corrected. Leadership would rotate based on expertise and need. The Corvani might lead exploration missions to dangerous regions. The Yelthari could head biological research initiatives. Ancient council species would oversee cultural preservation. Power shared is power diminished, Thorvak rumbled. Power shared is power multiplied, Sarah replied. The war proved that. Alone, none of us could defeat the Devourers. Together, we made it look easy. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Ancient council members voiced concerns about tradition, stability, and the wisdom of sudden change. Newer species argued for inclusion, representation, and the right to be heard. Through it all, Sarah listened carefully, noting which arguments carried weight and which objections could be addressed. Finally, Vexthul called for silence. This is perhaps the most significant decision in the Council's history. We are being asked to fundamentally change how the galaxy is governed. You're being asked to save it, Sarah said quietly. The Devourers were just one threat. There will be others. The galaxy needs to be ready. And you believe this new structure will provide that readiness? Sarah looked around the chamber at the diverse group of beings who had once been strangers and were now family. I believe that a galaxy where everyone has a voice is a galaxy where everyone will fight to protect it. The vote, when it came, was not unanimous. 3 of the original council members voted against the changes, clinging to ancient traditions. But 9 voted in favor, swayed by the undeniable results of human-led cooperation. More importantly, every one of the new species voted to join the expanded council structure. The motion passes, Vexthul announced. The Galactic Council will be restructured to include all willing species, with governance based on contribution rather than age. As celebrations erupted throughout the chamber, Sarah felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find Dr. Vasquez smiling at her. So, Elena said quietly, what do we do now? Sarah looked at the chaos of different species trying to figure out how to work together, the ancient counselors struggling to adapt to new realities, and the former enemies learning to become partners. Now we do the hard part, she said. We make it work. 6 months later, the first session of the new Galactic Council convened. Representatives from over 200 species filled the expanded chamber. The Corvani pirates had become the galaxy's exploration force, mapping new worlds with the same enthusiasm they had.